Good evening, dreamer. Tonight, the wind returns, soft and listening, ready to carry your quietest wishes into the stars. Long ago, or perhaps not long at all, in a place where time behaved like a drifting feather, there was a mountain crowned with pale mist. The villagers below whispered of a path that led upward, through weeping pines and tangled moss, toward a place where the earth forgot itself, and the skies remembered. Few dared the journey, fewer still returned with more than a soft smile and the scent of rain clinging to their clothes. For at the peak, it was said, there stood the last tea house before the clouds, a quiet place, built of dark wood and paper walls, where a lantern glowed even when the stars slept. One evening, just as the twilight thickened into violet folds, a solitary figure set out upon the path. Cloaked in a coat stitched with moth embroidery, carrying only a satchel and a silver-belled staff, the traveler moved slowly, for the way was not made of stones or earth, but of memories. The weeping pines bowed low, their branches whispering secrets in a tongue older than words. The ground, soft and mossy, cushioned each footfall like a mother's hand. Lantern moths fluttered lazily overhead, trailing thin ribbons of golden light. As the traveler walked, step by step, breath by breath, the world seemed to thin. Colors bled into one another, the air grew sweet, touched by the scent of forgotten rain. Somewhere ahead, a thin note of music trembled on the breeze, the soft chime of porcelain cups, perhaps, or the laughter of unseen spirits. The path curved and dipped, always upward, yet never steep, and the traveler did not tire. Instead, they felt lighter, as if each step unwound a thread of worry from their heart, leaving it to float behind like a discarded scarf. By the time the first paper lantern appeared, swaying gently from a low pine branch, the traveler knew, somehow, that they were close. They paused, brushing their fingers across the lantern's painted surface, where delicate cranes and cloud gardens spun in endless circles. A sign, hung crookedly upon the next tree, read in soft, fading ink. The last tea house before the clouds, another few heartbeats ahead. And so, smiling faintly, the traveler walked on. The mist thickened, as soft as wool, as silver as memory. It pooled in lazy eddies at the traveler's feet, wound itself through the low pine boughs, and veiled the world until only whispers and glimmers remained. Then, almost without realizing, the traveler stood before it. The tea house. It was small, humble, almost leaning into the mist, yet it shimmered with a quiet presence, as if it had grown from the very bones of the mountain. Its walls were latticed with thin wood and stretched silk, painted with scenes of rivers that flowed upside down and trees that bloomed with moons instead of fruit. A soft bell chimed, once, twice, though no hand had touched it. The door slid open with a whisper, revealing a room lit only by the tender glow of countless hanging lanterns. Some flickered like old memories, others pulsed like the heartbeat of dreams. Inside, the air was rich, not heavy, but full, with the scent of tea leaves, dried flowers, and a hint of the sea far below. There were no tables, only low cushions scattered across the polished floor, and in the center, an old woman knelt by a black iron kettle that sang with steam. She wore robes the color of midnight gardens, and in her hair, strands of silver drifted like spider silk. Her eyes, half-moon slivers, smiled without need of words. The traveler bowed, and the woman bowed in return, as though they had known each other always. Without speaking, she gestured to a cushion, and the traveler sank gratefully down, feeling the earth spin more slowly beneath them. From a shelf of countless jars, some labeled with words like "first rain" or "laughter of small rivers," the woman selected 3. She blended their contents in a small, cracked bowl, added water so hot it sang, and poured the tea into a cup no larger than a sparrow's egg. When the traveler lifted the cup, the scent rose, a drifting fragrance of faraway orchards, of soft lakes at twilight, of promises made and forgotten beneath ancient trees. As the tea touched their lips, the walls of the tea house rippled, and the clouds outside pressed closer. Somewhere beyond the mist, a river began to hum, soft, persistent, calling. And so, with the taste of dreams still lingering on their tongue, the traveler closed their eyes, and listened. The tea was not merely warm, it was living, it threaded through the traveler's veins like a river of soft gold. Their eyelids, though not heavy, fluttered closed, only for a moment, only long enough to listen to the music blooming inside their chest. When they opened their eyes again, the tea house had changed. The walls had softened, rippling like water stirred by the gentlest breeze. The old woman was gone, or perhaps she had only faded into another room, and in her place, a small doorway had appeared. It stood at the far side of the tea house, round as a coin, rimmed with vines that glowed faintly. It had no hinges, no handle, only a whisper stitched into the wood itself. "Step lightly." The traveler rose, feeling not rushed, not compelled, but simply meant, and crossed the soft, glowing floor. Each footfall sent a small ripple through the silk-like planks. When they reached the doorway, they found that it opened with a breath, sighing into the mist beyond. And there, like a memory too beautiful to hold, lay the mirror pond. It stretched wide, wider than a meadow, yet so still, so perfect, that it seemed at first to be another sky, resting flat against the earth. Around its edges grew low trees, their roots coiled in the mist, their leaves so pale they seemed carved from pearls. Above, no sun hung, only a soft, endless twilight, stitched with faint stars. The traveler stepped forward. Their reflection followed, but not exactly. The reflection smiled first. It moved with a slow grace, a whisper faster, a breath lighter, as though it were not a true mirror, but a dream remembering the shape of its dreamer. The traveler knelt by the water's edge, touched it with the tip of a finger. The surface trembled, and music bloomed, thin, silver notes that curled in the air like vines of sound. Across the pond, on a small island no bigger than a sigh, there stood a tree, solitary, vast, and glittering with something that might have been dew, or might have been tears of starlight. The traveler felt, rather than heard, a voice, soft, coiling, barely touching the mind. "Come, if you wish to remember, if you wish to wish again." And the mist coiled closer. There was no bridge, no boat, no stepping stones, only mist, and the wide, trembling expanse of the pond. The traveler hesitated, not in fear, but in wonder, their heart tuned to a music just out of reach. Then, very faintly, the mist thickened into a thread. A single line, fine as a spider's silk, silver as first frost, stretched from the travelers' toes to the island where the tree awaited. With a breath that fluttered the world around them, the traveler rose and placed one foot upon the thread. It did not sink. The thread held, trembling like a song plucked from a harp, and the traveler stepped again, and again, each footfall light as thistledown. Below, the pond mirrored not only their body, but their thoughts, dreams they had forgotten, hopes they had folded away like old letters, glimpses of soft laughter and gentle evenings. Each memory bloomed and faded beneath the water, rippling with each careful step. The wind stirred, oh, the wind, and it carried with it scents and sighs, promises and half-sung lullabies. It curled around the traveler, lifting the edges of their coat, whispering to the silver bells sewn into their hem. The sound was like distant temple bells, calling, remembering, blessing. Wish, the wind said, not with words but with warmth. Wish as once you did, before forgetting taught you silence. The traveler's heart beat once, slowly, then again, and each beat unfurled a small wish they had not known was still alive. A wish for endless quiet mornings. A wish for laughter to always find its way home. A wish for tears to turn into rivers of song. Step by step, dream by dream, wish by wish, the traveler reached the island at last. The great tree shimmered before them, its roots cradling the earth, its branches cradling the sky. From its lowest boughs hung thousands of tiny bells, each one made of pearl, of mist, of memory, and when the traveler stepped beneath them, the whole tree sang, softly, in 1,000 forgotten languages. The traveler knelt once more, not from weariness, but in wonder. And somewhere beyond the clouds above, the stars listened too. For a long while, the traveler simply listened. The bells swayed gently in a breeze that did not stir their hair, a music too deep, too tender for the waking world. The island itself seemed to breathe, slow, patient, as though it had been waiting for this very moment, this very soul, for 1,000 quiet years. And then, without a sound, the traveler saw it. At the base of the great tree, nestled between thick roots dusted with soft moss, was a hollow, no larger than a cupped hand. From within, there came a faint, bluish glow, as if moonlight had decided to curl up there, and sleep. Curious, but not hurried, never hurried, the traveler reached forward. Inside the hollow, their fingers brushed something, cool, smooth, a small, round stone, humming faintly against their skin. Lifting it, they found it was not stone at all, but a pearl, vast and imperfect, with swirling colors trapped within its heart. As they cradled the pearl, the pond shivered, a single, shimmering ripple that spread from the island's edges to the farthest reaches of the mist. And in its mirror surface, the traveler saw, not themselves, but a doorway. An arch of water and starlight had formed across the pond, leading downward, downward, into the waters themselves, into a world beneath reflections. There was no fear, only a soft, endless invitation. As naturally as stepping into a remembered dream, the traveler rose, holding the pearl close, and moved toward the water's edge. The first step sank them ankle-deep in coolness, but the water parted for them, silken and clear. Each step deeper was a sigh, a letting go, a slow descent into music made visible. And as the pond closed overhead, the traveler drifted down, into the heart of the mirror. The world beneath the pond was not dark, but gleaming, a soft, endless twilight stitched with tendrils of drifting light. Great gardens unfurled in every direction, gardens of impossible plants, vines that bore glowing feathers instead of leaves, blossoms that opened and closed with the rhythm of a sleeping breath. The ground beneath the traveler's feet was solid, yet soft, a path woven from pale threads of silver moss. Floating all around were tiny, weightless lights, small as fireflies, large as lanterns, and as the traveler moved, they realized what they truly were. Wishes. Each light was a wish, some fresh and bright, flickering eagerly, others older, dimmer, sleeping softly, wrapped in the velvet of forgotten years. Wishes for love, for peace, for laughter, wishes never spoken aloud, wishes whispered only once, long ago, to the silent stars. The traveler marveled, slowly, reverently, moving through the garden where wishes came to rest. Here, a small light brushed their cheek, humming like a lullaby. There, another circled their hand, leaving a thread of silver warmth upon their skin. Each step forward wove a music that grew richer, soft chimes, breathy strings, deep heartbeats made of earth and sky. At the very center of the garden stood a tree, not like the one above, but younger, more tender. It was no taller than the traveler themselves, its bark like woven mist, its leaves like trembling stars. And around its roots, gently curled like sleeping kittens, lay the oldest wishes, ones made not with words, but with sighs, with silences, with dreams. The traveler knelt before the young tree. From the folds of their coat, they lifted the pearl, the living memory of the pond, and placed it into the cradle of the roots. For a moment, all was still. Then the tree breathed, a long, slow inhalation, and from its branches bloomed 100 new lights, rising, dancing, scattering into the misty sky. A soft wind stirred, the same wind that had carried wishes once long ago, now stronger, wiser, fuller. The traveler watched, heart unfurling like a flower at dawn, as the wind rose, carrying the newborn wishes into the unseen skies above, where dreams are planted in the sleeping hearts of the world. And in that soft, shimmering quiet, the traveler smiled. They had remembered. They had wished. They had planted dreams anew. The mirror pond gleamed, the garden of sleeping wishes hummed, and above it all, the last tea house waited, a lantern in the mist, always ready, always welcoming. The garden faded slowly, not as a door shuts, but as a memory recedes when the morning grows too bright. The traveler lingered for a moment longer, watching the last of the pearl lights ascend, their silver trails curling into invisibility, before they turned back toward the mirror pond. The path they had taken, the soft moss thread, shimmered now with a different light, woven from all the wishes they had stirred awake. It welcomed them, humming underfoot, as if thanking them for their journey. Upward they drifted, not climbing, not swimming, simply rising, as mist rises when touched by a gentle hand. Soon the traveler broke through the pond's surface once more, finding themselves standing not in cold water, but in soft mist, the bridge of silk still stretching across the way, thin as a dream's breath. They set foot upon it. Each step sent ripples through the world, but this time, the ripples carried laughter, memories, lullabies. Below the bridge, the reflections in the pond had changed. Now, instead of forgotten dreams, there were promises. Promises of return, promises of peace, promises of endless, gentle nights. The island grew smaller behind them, the great tree bowing its mist-silvered branches in farewell. And before them, the doorway of the tea house yawned open, a soft, warm glow spilling out, as inviting as a firelit room on the coldest of evenings. As the traveler crossed the final few steps of the bridge, the silver thread dissolved beneath their feet, a final bow, a final blessing, leaving only mist and memory behind. And the traveler stepped once more inside the tea house, heart lighter, eyes brighter, soul a little more complete. Inside, the tea house had changed once again, but not in ways the traveler could name. The walls still shimmered like silk, the lanterns still floated, pulsing gently like sleeping hearts. Yet now, a second cushion had been placed near the first, and on it sat a figure. They were cloaked in soft gray, with a hood that hid their face, and around their shoulders clung a shawl embroidered with tiny, shimmering leaves. In their lap, they cradled a small, curious object, a wooden flute carved into the shape of a bird mid-flight. The traveler bowed, and the figure bowed in return, a slow, graceful movement that stirred the air like the turning of a page. The old woman, the tea mistress, had returned, silent and smiling, carrying a new tray. Upon it rested 2 cups, twin vessels of porcelain, so thin the light passed through them like morning mist. With careful hands, she poured from a kettle whose steam curled upward in soft spirals. The tea was different this time. It smelled of distant meadows, of riverbanks where reeds whispered secrets, of nights so quiet that the stars could hear one's heartbeat. The old woman offered the first cup to the traveler, and the second to the cloaked figure. Together, in perfect, unhurried silence, they lifted their cups. The tea kissed their lips like a memory half remembered, and the warmth spread outward, filling not just their bodies, but the very room, and beyond the room, the mist, and beyond the mist, the dreaming world. The cloaked figure lowered their cup first and spoke, not aloud, but in a voice that brushed against the mind like the gentlest wind. All who remember the way here, they said, carry the seed of wishes in their hearts. And the traveler, feeling no need to reply, simply smiled, the kind of smile that needs no witness, no reason, no end. The lanterns above shivered softly, and the tea house, poised between earth and cloud, between waking and dreaming, sighed, a slow, endless sigh of belonging. Night thickened outside, velvet and deep. Inside, time folded itself into a soft, sleeping knot, and all was peace. The tea lingered in the traveler's veins, a warmth both rooted and weightless, like the hush between 2 waves on a sleeping shore. The cloaked figure, their cup now empty, rose without a sound. They gestured once, a simple sweep of the hand, and a panel of the tea house, so thin it had seemed a mere shadow, slid open. Beyond it was no room, no hallway, only sky. But not the sky of day, nor night. It was a soft, endless stretch of mist and velvet twilight, stitched with threads of slow-turning stars and the faint golden shimmer of drifting wishes. The wind awaited there, not fierce nor cold, but shaped like a slow river, moving among unseen shores. The traveler stood. The old woman, smiling still, pressed something into their hand, a small pendant, made of silver and glass, shaped like a single teardrop holding a captured breeze. The traveler tucked it close, feeling its pulse, and without hesitation, stepped through the open panel. At once, the wind caught them, not lifting them away, but folding them gently into its current, as a child might be wrapped in a quilt. The tea house faded behind them, not vanishing but dimming, growing softer, as if it had always been part of the mist itself. And the traveler, carried now by the wind of wishes, drifted higher. The mist peeled back in slow veils. The pond was a silver coin far below, the mountain a mere ripple in the dreaming earth. Above, the stars pulsed and hummed like hearts at rest. And the traveler felt the pull. The wind whispered, not in words, but in memories, each current a thread from another soul, hopes, sighs, soft laughter, tears that had dried into songs. They floated onward, weightless, timeless, breath held in wonder. And ahead, rising from the endless mist, was something new, something vast, and waiting. A place where wishes, old and newborn, found their rest. The mist thinned until it was no more than a breath. The traveler emerged into a place that was neither sky nor earth, but something between, something softer. Before them stretched a vast field, endless, silver green, its grasses shimmering with the light of unseen moons. Tiny lights, wishes, dreams, memories, drifted among the blades like fireflies too sleepy to ascend. Some curled around wildflowers, others tucked themselves beneath curling leaves. The traveler stepped into the field. The grasses bent to their passage, murmuring greetings, weaving songs into the folds of the wind. Each step forward brought not a road, but a path nonetheless, one revealed not by the eyes, but by the heart. It was a way made of belonging, of remembering, of hoping. In the heart of the field stood a great circle of stones, ancient, moss-draped, humming low and steady. At the very center of the circle lay a single, vast bloom, a flower the size of a lake, with petals layered like the folds of 1,000 dreams. It pulsed gently, a slow, steady heartbeat, cradling the wishes gathered from all the wandering winds of the world. The traveler knelt before the flower. The pendant around their neck warmed, glowed, and released its tiny captured breeze. The breath of the pendant joined the larger wind, twining upward in a soft spiral, rising into the stars, carrying with it the traveler's own silent wishes, the ones they had not even known they carried. For a long time, or perhaps no time at all, the traveler rested there. The wind folded around them. The grasses sang. The field breathed. And somewhere deep within the traveler, a door opened, one that led not outward, but inward, into a place where peace was not sought, because it had always been. The wind whispered, one last time, like a lullaby sewn into the folds of sleep. Carry dreams gently, as dreams carry thee. The traveler closed their eyes, and smiled. Above the field, the stars turned, slow, eternal, full of song. Time, in the field beyond the clouds, did not move forward. It unfolded, like petals, turning not toward endings, but toward endless beginnings. The traveler, resting beneath the great dreaming flower, felt their heart steady, their mind grow as quiet as the spaces between stars. Yet, even in perfect stillness, there came a sense, not of urgency, not of departure, but of gentle, inevitable return. The grasses stirred once more. The wind, carrying the sense of forgotten orchards and rain-washed stones, coiled around the traveler with the tenderness of an old friend. It whispered again, low, soft, certain. Return, and carry the dream within thee. And so the traveler rose. No farewell was needed, the stones, the flower, the grasses, the endless sky, all seemed to nod in understanding. The traveler stepped once, and the mist welcomed them. Stepped again, and the field faded behind a silver veil. The wind carried them downward, though downward did not feel like falling, only like returning to the surface of a beloved, sleeping world. Mist thickened. The stars folded themselves into bright threads. The scent of tea leaves, of wood smoke, of ancient pines began to bloom in the air. At last, as soft as a sigh, the traveler landed upon the polished floorboards of the last tea house. The old woman awaited them, silent, smiling, her eyes two crescent moons. She bowed once, slowly, reverently, and the traveler bowed in return, feeling the deep weight of understanding pass between them like a thread. The tea house glowed, every lantern brighter now, every silk wall humming with a music so fine it could only be felt in the bones. The traveler understood, they had not returned unchanged. They had brought something back, a memory, a seed, a wish stitched into the very heart of their being. And so, they stepped once more to the threshold of the tea house, ready. Beyond the door, the world awaited, mist-touched, starlit, softer than they had left it. And in their chest, the wind of wishes still hummed. The path that once wound steeply through the weeping pines was gentler now, or perhaps it was the traveler who had changed. They moved down the mountain with slow, savoring steps, their silver-belled staff chiming softly at their side. The villagers who glimpsed the traveler from their doorways felt a change in the air. A kind of stillness, a kind of blessing. The winds that tugged at their shutters carried no storm, only the scent of rain and sweet grasses. Some said the traveler had found the cloud's edge. Others, that they had traded places with a spirit of the mist. But no one asked directly, and the traveler offered no tale, only a smile that warmed even the coldest mornings. In quiet ways, the world shifted. A weaver began to craft tapestries filled with impossible silver birds. A baker woke one night from a dream of starlight and created bread so light it seemed stitched from clouds. Children laughed more freely. Old sorrows found their way to the river and floated out to sea. And somewhere, when the night grew very still, and only the whisper of pines stirred the darkness, a soft, unseen bell would ring, once, twice, carrying a sound that reached even the deepest sleepers. The traveler lived among them, not apart, but quietly woven into the fabric of the world, carrying the dream within them. Not loudly. Not with grand stories. But with small things, a hand resting on another's shoulder, a lantern placed at a crossroads, a song hummed under the breath on a long, misty evening. And always, deep in the heart of the mountain, the last tea house waited, its doors open to those who remembered the path, and carried a wish yet unspoken. Above it all, the mist curled. The stars turned. And the wind of wishes sang, slow, silver, eternal. The dream lived on. In a seaside village stitched with fog and silence, one old man crafts lanterns no one buys, each one made from starlight and memory. Tonight, he lights one more, and it changes everything. In the hush of a forgotten valley, where wildflowers grew taller than the fences, and owls sang lullabies to the stars, there slept a pond. It did not ripple. It did not murmur. It simply rested, still and mirror smooth, as if it had fallen asleep watching the sky, and never quite awakened. No path led to it. No map named it. Yet, sometimes, when the moon was low and full of secrets, those who wandered without looking might stumble upon it. Not with their eyes, but with their heart. It was on such a night, quiet as velvet and rich with the scent of jasmine, that a young painter named Elian wandered beyond the edges of their village, chasing silence. They did not carry brushes, nor canvas, only a book of empty pages, and a pencil dulled by time. Elian followed no road, only the sound of wind through the reeds, and the pull of something they could not name. And then, past a cluster of silver-leaf trees, where the ground dipped and the air grew cooler, they found it. The pond. So still it seemed made of glass, yet so deep it shimmered with colors not found in any sky. It reflected not only the moon and stars, but things long vanished. A tree that once stood nearby, now gone. A cloud that had passed hours earlier. A face that looked like Elian's, but slightly younger, slightly sadder, slightly dreaming. They stepped to the water's edge. Something stirred beneath the surface, a hum, low and melodic, like the echo of an ancient lullaby. It was not sound, exactly, but memory, wrapped in music. And though Elian did not speak, the pond whispered in return. You have carried silence long enough. Let the water remember for you. And Elian, knees folded, pencil resting beside them, gazed into the mirrored depths, and listened. Time drifted, soft as mist. Elian did not sleep, but neither did they wake, caught between breaths, between pages, between the stars above and the memories below. And then, a light. Not from the moon, no, this was warmer, rounder, a golden orb that bobbed gently toward them through the trees. It was a lantern. Carried by a figure wrapped in dust-colored robes, their face hidden by the glow. Their footsteps made no sound, as though the earth dared not interrupt their quiet. Elian stood slowly. The figure approached, stopping a few paces away, and held out a hand, not in demand, but in invitation. The lantern swayed. And with a heart both hesitant and drawn, Elian placed their hand in the stranger's. No words were exchanged. Together, they walked, not away from the pond, but across it. The water held their steps, rippling faintly beneath each footfall. With every step, a memory bloomed just below the surface. A laughter long gone. The smell of their mother's hair on a warm day. A rainstorm that had once ruined their sketchbook, and birthed the most beautiful smear of color. The lantern's glow deepened. And ahead, rising from the heart of the pond, there appeared something impossible. A tea house. Delicate, serene, suspended upon wide, curling lily leaves. Its paper walls flickered gently, and a soft wind wound through its beams, carrying the scent of steeped petals and quiet thunder. The stranger led Elian to the low door, bowed once, and disappeared, leaving the lantern in their hand. Inside, a kettle began to sing. And somewhere beyond the clouds, the wind stirred, listening. Elian stepped into the tea house with the lantern still glowing gently in their hand. The floor beneath their feet did not creak, it sighed, as though the wood itself remembered dreams. The air was warm, fragrant with something soft, hints of plum blossom, rain-drenched moss, and distant spice. Cushions lined the low walls, stitched with tiny clouds and delicate birds. A table no taller than the length of a book rested at the center, and behind it sat an old woman, her back straight, her eyes half closed, her fingers wrapped around a clay teapot so worn its surface looked like driftwood. She did not look up. Yet when Elian knelt quietly on a cushion, she smiled, not with her lips, but with her breath, with her stillness. From a small shelf beside her, she took down 3 jars, unlabeled, each sealed with wax as pale as pearls. One she opened slowly, letting the scent curl through the room like a ribbon. The second, she tapped gently, allowing only a pinch to fall. The third, she opened only long enough to let the wind drift in. It came, soft, unseen, as a breath through the eaves, curling into the pot as she poured the first trickle of water. The steam rose, not in curls, but in shapes, a moth, a hill, a river seen from above. Elian stared, wide-eyed, as the scent of the tea opened something in their chest they hadn't known was closed. The old woman poured 2 cups. One for Elian. One for the air beside them, for the wind that now settled, unseen, but present. Elian lifted the cup. It was warm, not hot, and as the tea touched their lips, a hush fell across the pond, the sky, the very stars. And within that hush, a sound began. Not outside, but within. A voice, older than wind, older than sorrow, whispering. Drink, and remember not what was, but what still longs to be. And Elian did. The tea was not a flavor, it was a path. With the first sip, Elian felt their heartbeat slow. With the second, they heard laughter, not around them, but within, the laughter of their younger self, before silence had become a companion. With the third, the floor fell away. Not literally, but in a way deeper than sight. The cushion still held them, the room still glowed, but beneath the floor, a second world shimmered. Not darker, not beneath, just within. A sky, vast, wind-stirred, with stars scattered like gentle seeds. Elian blinked, and saw it clearly now, the tea house floated upon that sky, as it had upon the pond. But this sky lived inside them. It was made of dreams not dreamt. Paintings never begun. Words never spoken. And in that sky drifted wishes. Not grand ones, no gold, no glory. Small, trembling things, a hand held longer, a song hummed to a sleeping friend, a walk never taken but always imagined. The wind stirred again, lifting the edges of Elian's coat, curling around the empty space beside the teacup it had been given. "Do you see now?" the voice asked, not aloud, but through the steam, through the hush, through the way the light leaned softly in. Elian nodded. And in that moment, the walls of the tea house grew transparent, not vanishing, but revealing. The pond below glowed softly. The sky above turned deeper, painted now with drifting petals and stars that blinked with memory. And the wind, no longer unseen, began to take shape. Not a creature. Not a shadow. But a form made of movement, of sighs, of the hush after a poem. It hovered near, waiting. And Elian knew, a choice was near. To follow it. Or return. But not just yet. One more cup would be poured. One more secret revealed. The night still had a story to tell. The last sip of tea lingered on Elian's tongue, soft, floral, tasting of something they could not name. Not a flavor, but a feeling. Like touching the edge of a memory so old it no longer belonged to the mind, only to the heart. The wind rose now, not as a gust, not as sound, but as a presence that filled the space between each breath. And there, beside the old woman's cushion, a door appeared. It was not built. It had not been carved. It simply was, as though the tea itself had made space for it, or as though it had always been there, waiting for Elian to learn how to see it. No frame. No hinges. Just an arch, wide and round, made of starlight stretched thin, like glass that had melted into shape beneath the breath of a cloud. Elian looked to the old woman. She said nothing. But her eyes, soft, half-closed, seemed to smile once more. The wind beckoned. Elian rose, slow as dawn. The lantern flickered gently in their hand, then dimmed, no longer needed. They stepped through the arch, and did not fall, nor float. They simply moved, forward, into something softer than space. The world beyond was not dark, but dim, in the way dreams are dim when they are realist. A garden unfolded. Not of earth and flower, but of light. Tiny blossoms drifted through the air, pulsing faintly. They hung from invisible stems, twirled in spirals, and opened when brushed by passing thought. Each light, a wish. Elian reached out, and one floated close, a warm blue, humming faintly. It whispered, "May my brother never forget the sound of the sea." Elian's breath caught. The wind drifted close again, circling them, as the garden expanded, not outward, but inward, deeper into their very soul. This was not just a place. It was a memory of the world's most tender hopes. Elian stepped slowly among the floating blooms. Each one was a whisper. Some soft as feathers, others aching with sweetness. Some recent, a child's breath, a traveler's murmur, and others ancient, fragile, barely clinging to the air. There were wishes for safe returns. Wishes for silence where noise had wounded. Wishes for one more story, one more song, one more moment held just a little longer. And each one floated here, cradled by the wind. The wind did not hurry. It passed through the garden like a gentle stream, brushing each light with care. Sometimes it carried one away, upward, into the dreaming sky, and sometimes, it let them rest, undisturbed, a little longer. Elian felt something shift in their chest. A quiet realization. They, too, had a wish. Not loud. Not certain. But real. They placed a hand over their heart, closed their eyes, and listened to the hush between beats. And there it was. Not a wish for change, nor for answers, but simply this. Let someone, somewhere, feel seen. The wind stilled, as if pausing mid-breath, then wrapped gently around them, warm, and almost shy. One of the blossoms nearby, pale gold and shimmering, opened for the first time. It had been sleeping, waiting for a wish to match its shape. It floated to Elian's shoulder, settled there for just a heartbeat, then lifted, carried upward, spinning slowly, until it vanished into the stars above the garden. The wind hummed its approval. And Elian, without knowing why, began to cry. Not from sorrow, but from fullness. From knowing that even the quietest part of them had been heard. And the garden, in reply, glowed a little brighter. The golden blossom vanished beyond the mist, not lost, but carried, and Elian stood in the stillness that followed. A stillness that did not press, nor pull. It simply was, vast and soft and filled with space enough for every breath to stretch wide and slow. The wind circled again, wrapping gently around Elian's shoulders like a shawl spun from memory. It moved now with intention, guiding, nudging, inviting. Elian followed. There were no walls here. No paths. Yet the wind knew the way. It led them beyond the blossom garden, through veils of silver mist, past drifting lanterns and pockets of starlight resting low, like fallen clouds. And then, as if the world had turned inside out, the sky opened beneath their feet. Not an abyss, not a fall, but a sky turned on its side, folded like silk. Soft blues, rose-colored shadows, and streams of quiet motion flowed beneath them. A sky made for walking. And walk they did. With each step, Elian passed over small moments, scenes unfolding within the sky's folds. A child spinning a wooden top under starlight. A fox curling beneath a winter tree. Two old friends sharing soup in silence. The wind paused beside each one, just long enough for Elian to feel the pulse of meaning, not stories with beginnings or ends, but fragments that belonged just as they were. And then, ahead, the horizon curved upward, revealing a soft, circular platform that floated among the clouds. Upon it stood a chair. Simple. Wooden. Worn. Elian knew, somehow, that it was meant for them. They approached slowly, and sat. And the wind, like an old friend settling nearby, began to speak. The wind's voice was not one sound, but many, layered, delicate, 1,000 whispers gathered over time, speaking gently through the hush. All who find the mirror pond, it said, carry a wish they have never spoken aloud. Elian said nothing. Their hand rested on the arm of the chair. Their heart was still. Some leave the wish there, the wind continued, and some carry it farther. Fewer still, become part of the wind itself. Elian looked up. Around them, the sky folded inward, and the clouds formed the shape of a vast, blooming flower, its petals curling through the air, its center glowing with soft amber light. "This wind you feel," it said, "was once a child who wished to never see anyone cry again." Another strand, it whispered, was an old woman who wished for lost voices to be heard. Elian's breath caught. They looked down at their hands, once filled with silence, once aching to create, and now so gently full of stillness. "You have given your wish," the wind said. "Now you may return, or remain. Become the wind that carries dreams. That places blossoms beside sleeping heads. That brushes the hands of the lonely, unseen." And just then, drifting by, was a vision. A child sleeping beneath a window painted with stars. A blossom floating gently to the sill. A breath, deeper than before. A smile, formed in sleep. Elian's chest filled with warmth, not sharp, not sudden, just right. They did not speak. They only placed their hand over their heart again. And the wind, in quiet joy, wrapped them in light. All around, the sky turned once more. The tea house, the pond, the garden, all grew smaller. But not because they were fading. Because Elian had risen. Become part of the hush. Part of the hope. Part of the wind. Elian was no longer Elian, not in the way the world would know them. They had no form, and yet, they were everywhere the wind passed. In the hush before morning. In the stillness that falls between one word and the next. In the warmth that brushes across a face just before a long-forgotten memory returns. They were not ghost, nor echo, but presence. A kindness that threaded through the dreaming world like a silver thread. And in their stillness, they listened. Not for noise, not for sorrow, but for wishes. Each night, in villages tucked beneath sleepy hills. In rooms with shutters gently clicking in wind. In hearts that forgot how to ask for what they longed to feel. A blossom would drift. Not falling. Not sent. Simply, arriving. And somewhere, always quietly, someone would sigh in sleep, and dream deeper. The wind carried lanterns now, small, round lights with no flame. They pulsed gently, each holding a single, sleeping wish. And Elian, woven into the wind, guided them. Past the pine forests. Over the seas that glimmered with moonlight. Through chimneys and shutters, to windowsills and pillows. To those who had forgotten the way, but still whispered in their hearts. And always, always, when the wind passed by the mirror pond, now still and glowing, it would slow. Just for a moment. The surface would shimmer. A single blossom would drift across its glassy face. And the sky would remember what it had once reflected. The tea house still stood, cradled on lily leaves that never browned, never sank. Its lanterns swayed gently, though no hands lit them. And each evening, just as the stars opened their slow, sleepy eyes, the paper walls would glow, soft as memory, warm as promise. Sometimes, a traveler would find it. A wanderer seeking silence. A child who had walked too far, chasing the end of the wind. A weaver, a singer, a soul with something unspoken curled deep inside. They would see the pond. They would see their own reflection, but softened, aged not by time, but by longing. They would sit at the edge and listen. And if their wish was quiet enough, the lantern would come. The door would open. And tea would be poured by hands they could not remember, but had always known. Not every visitor stayed. Some sipped the tea, shed a tear, and walked back into the world lighter, with a blossom tucked behind one ear. Others left their voice behind, woven into the hush of reeds. And some, a few, became wind. Elian was not alone. Others joined them, gently, over time, drifting in threads of laughter and lullabies, of lullabies and loss, of whispered pleas and softer thank yous. And together, they circled the world. A wind that did not blow, but blessed. And the pond, ever still, ever watching, remembered each of them. Not by name, but by wish. By the way they made the world feel more like a home. And so, the dream never ended. It simply waited. With tea, and mist, and lantern light. For the next wish to whisper. And the next soul to listen. Deep in a forest that hums and whispers, a quiet girl learns to speak with moths. They guide her to a glade where forgotten wishes sleep, and wait to bloom once more. In a valley the color of resting lavender, where the hills rose like gentle shoulders and the trees leaned in just close enough to listen, there lay a village where the wind was never feared. It was not shut out, nor blocked, nor braced against. No, when dusk arrived, the people of that village opened their windows. They unlatched shutters. They let the curtains breathe. Even the old doors with rusty hinges were open just a crack. And always, someone, perhaps a child, or someone older with a quiet soul, would stand by the step or the window and say, just under their breath, "Come now, wind. We are ready." And the wind would come. Not as a roar, or a storm, or anything grand. It came in with the sigh of the sky leaning down. It came with the smell of rain that had never fallen. It slipped between candle flames without disturbing them, and it brushed the backs of hands with the softness of memory. It was said, though never loudly, that this wind could carry things. Not seeds, nor dust, nor birdsong. But wishes. Not the ones shouted in anger, or scribbled hastily in notebooks. Only the quiet ones. The ones tucked under pillows. The ones that people didn't know they were still holding. When the wind came, people left little offerings. Paper slips, folded tight. Pebbles with names scratched into them. Ribbons tied to fences. And sometimes, just breath, exhaled through lips that trembled. No one knew where the wind carried them. But they believed, softly, not with certainty, but with hope, that somewhere, these wishes were gathered. Cradled. And maybe, if the wind chose, fulfilled in ways no one quite expected. And so, every dusk, the village listened. Every dusk, the wind returned. Finn never offered paper. They watched the others, how the children wrote their hopes in looping letters, how the grown folk held their palms to the breeze and whispered things too soft to overhear. But Finn remained still, seated high above the village, where the grass grew long and silver-threaded and the sky felt close enough to touch. Each evening, just before the wind arrived, Finn would climb the worn path up the hill, a path they could walk even in darkness, even in dreams. There, among the ribbon flowers and stones warm from the day's light, they sat with knees drawn to their chest and eyes half lost in the turning sky. They never spoke their wish aloud. Not because they didn't have one, but because it felt too delicate. As if the act of naming it would scatter it like dandelion seed. Still, the wind came. It curled around Finn, softer here than anywhere else, wrapping them like a shawl stitched from lullabies. It played with the hem of their sleeve. It stirred the strands of their hair. And though Finn said nothing, the wind stayed longer with them than with anyone. One evening, as twilight fell in folds of violet and gold, Finn found something new waiting where they always sat, a tiny bell, no larger than a thumbprint, tied with a thread of sky-colored silk. It did not chime with sound. It chimed with stillness, a hush that lived inside the chest, a warmth behind the eyes. Holding it made Finn feel heard. There was a slip of paper tucked beneath it. Not written in ink, but woven into the fibers of the paper itself. The wind heard you anyway. Finn pressed the bell to their heart. They did not cry. But something inside them quietly unfolded. And the wind curled close once more. That night, Finn did not sleep. Not for lack of weariness, but because the stillness inside them had grown so wide, so quietly full, that it left no room for dreams. The tiny bell, resting beside their pillow, pulsed faintly, barely light, not quite warmth, a hush that moved without movement. Outside, the wind stirred gently, whispering down rooftops and through the threads of the trees. And then, something changed. Finn sat up. Their room, usually dim and dusted with starlight, now glowed faintly at the corners. Not with firelight, nor with moonlight, but with something older. Something like breath, if breath could be made visible. Petals began to fall. From nowhere. From the ceiling, from the corners, from places Finn could not name. Pale blossoms, soft as moth wings, drifted down, each glowing faintly, each leaving a trace of silver light in the air behind them. They did not land. They hovered. Swirled. Danced in slow spirals. And then, the wall across from Finn's bed began to shimmer. Not break. Not vanish. Just change. A doorway appeared. Framed in floating petals and strands of light, it was not made of wood or stone. It was shaped from air and memory. Through it, Finn could see something impossible, a meadow that shimmered as though the stars had taken root in the ground. The bell on the pillow lifted into the air. It rang without ringing. It asked nothing. It simply invited. Finn rose slowly. Not afraid. Not excited. Only, ready. They stepped forward, barefoot on the petals, through the doorway spun of breath and wish. And the wind met them there, waiting, patient, humming softly. Together, they entered the dream beyond dreams. The world beyond the doorway did not begin. It simply was. Finn stood upon a meadow, wide and rolling, though there were no hills. The ground was not ground, but a silver-blue tapestry of grass that moved like gentle waves, rising and falling in a rhythm as slow and certain as a heartbeat. Above them, stars hung low, so low that some brushed the tips of the tall grasses, leaving trails of gold behind. The sky was neither day nor night, but a soft hour between them, painted in endless hues of violet and blue and something unnamed, a color that lived only in the hush between breaths. The wind moved ahead, brushing the path clear not by force, but by welcome. And Finn followed. They did not ask questions. They did not need to. Each step felt like moving through a memory not their own, and yet deeply familiar. In the distance, nestled beneath an enormous willow with leaves like falling ink, stood a figure. Not quite person. Not quite air. It shimmered faintly, a being made of wind and light, with hands like breeze-touched fabric and a face that flickered softly, shaped not by bone, but by presence. Finn approached. The figure held out a hand, long, slender, made of threads, and when Finn took it, the world hushed a little more. The meadow quieted. The stars leaned closer. And the wind whispered not into Finn's ears, but into their heart. Let us show you where the wishes go. The bell around Finn's neck chimed softly. And the petals lifted once more. Beneath the willow's long, glimmering arms, the grass folded down as if bowing. The wind being stepped forward, and with a motion like parting a veil, revealed a hidden path that had not been there a moment before. It was not dug into the earth, it was woven into it. Threads of moon silver, feather gray, and dream white stitched their way forward, forming a staircase that descended without darkness. Finn followed, their bells swaying gently against their chest, not ringing but responding to every breath of air around them. The deeper they walked, the quieter the world became, until even the sound of thought seemed to fall away. The steps curved softly, like a lullaby spiraling inward, leading into a vast chamber that seemed to glow from within. The hall of slumbering wishes. Finn paused at the base of the stair. Before them floated hundreds, no, thousands, of lanterns. But these were no ordinary lanterns. Each one hovered in the air, not hanging nor resting, but floating softly as though suspended by the hush itself. They were shaped like teardrops, stars, tiny boats, open hands. And within each glowed a light of some memory, warm, flickering, full of feeling. The guide turned to Finn and spoke, not aloud, but in the air between them. Every wish the wind carries finds its way here. Finn's eyes widened. Some lanterns pulsed with joy. Others flickered faintly, almost forgotten. One glowed the soft blue of first tears. Another shimmered in the golden light of childhood laughter. They walked slowly through the hall. The lanterns responded, glowing brighter, drifting closer, as if recognizing something inside Finn. One brushed gently past their cheek, and Finn felt a memory rise, a rainy afternoon, a paper boat, a hand they once let go of too soon. Finn's chest ached, but gently. The ache of remembering something precious, and knowing it had never truly left. And above them, the wind sighed. A sound full of love. The further they walked into the hall, the dimmer the lanterns became, not because they were fading, but because they were farther away, drifting upward, beyond reach, toward the high-vaulted dome of the hush-filled space. Finn looked up. These were different. Their shapes were softer, more uncertain, cloud-like, unfinished. They pulsed more slowly, like hearts remembering how to beat. These are the wishes that were never spoken, the guide said, their voice a shimmer across Finn's shoulders. Not because they were unworthy, but because they were too quiet, even for their dreamers to hear. Finn swallowed. A lump rose in their throat, unexpected. "Do they still matter?" they whispered. The guide turned toward them, eyes aglow like distant moons. "They matter most. They are the ones the wind holds longest." And just then, one of the drifting wishes slowed. Its light pulsed once, twice, recognition. It turned in the air and descended, a slow spiral, until it hovered just above Finn's outstretched hands. Finn did not need to ask what it held. They knew. The lantern shimmered silver blue and, for a moment, revealed its memory, a small figure on a hill, knees hugged tight, eyes closed against the world. A longing, unspoken. A hope not quite brave enough to become words. Their wish. The one never said. The one they thought had been forgotten. Finn's eyes filled. The lantern drifted closer, then pressed gently into their chest, not burning, not vanishing, but joining. Inside them, the wish bloomed. Not into answer. Not into miracle. But into understanding. And around them, the hall glowed brighter. The wind had carried it all along. The hall of slumbering wishes faded behind Finn like a tide slipping out to sea, not gone, only gentled into distance. The wind being, still and shimmering, raised one hand and the world around them opened, not with sound, but with breath. A door unfolded. Not in a wall, but in the air itself, a seam parting in the sky, stitched with threads of slow-turning stars and petals that shimmered like frost. Through it flowed the wind, winding upward into a place where time forgot how to count, and memory became motion. Finn stepped through. And there was the sky between moments. It stretched far and high, but it was not empty. It was full of threads, fine as spider silk, glinting in gentle arcs across the air. Each thread hummed with a life, not a name, not a story, but a single, quiet feeling, a laugh shared between strangers, a glance through a rain-wet window, the last note of a lullaby sung into a sleeping room. Finn floated, not because they willed it, but because here, everything floated. They drifted alongside the wind, which now pulsed in hues of soft gold and rose. It moved between the threads like a weaver, gently twisting, lifting, tucking small blossoms into the strands. "These are moments," said the wind, voice now all around. "This is where wishes are placed when they are ready." Finn reached out, fingertips brushing a nearby thread, and felt a wave of warmth spill into their palm, a warm mug held by cold fingers, a fire crackling while snow fell outside, someone exhaling, finally, after being understood. Not one's own moment, but one gifted, from a wish long ago. Finn smiled, and the sky rippled softly in reply. The wind turned gently, like a tide preparing to shift. Below them now stretched a garden, suspended in air, blooming across nothing but the hush of the world. It did not grow in soil. Its roots curled into breeze. Its blossoms unfolded only when touched by quiet thoughts. Finn descended slowly, the petals beneath their feet forming steps with each motion. The air here smelled of soft things, sun-warmed linen, bread cooling on a windowsill, the space left in a bed when someone wakes early and lets the other sleep. They had entered the garden of given dreams. The wind moved among the vines and tall, floating trees, their branches hung with bells so delicate they rang only when someone forgave themselves. Each plant had grown from a single wish, not one fulfilled, but received. Finn walked past a tree with spiral leaves. Beneath it bloomed a single blue flower, and as Finn leaned closer, they heard a whisper. May she always know she was loved. A few steps farther, a cluster of golden lilies whispered. Let him find rest when he is ready. Each plant had bloomed from a wish not for the dreamer, but for someone else. The wind circled Finn once more. When a wish is made for another, it said, it roots itself here. Finn knelt beside a vine growing upward into nothing, its leaves shaped like folded paper. They touched one. And it opened. Inside was their own voice, spoken softly, once, on a hill, never aloud. I hope someone finds peace someday, even if I never do. And in that moment, as the leaf unfurled into light, Finn realized that someone had. And the wish had already come true. The garden faded not with silence, but with a sound softer still, the exhale of a wish fulfilled. The vines bowed as Finn passed. The blossoms tucked their light close, sleeping once more. The wind led them upward. No path. No stair. Only rising, as if Finn's heart had lightened enough to lift the rest of them. Higher they went, through a sky that deepened from blue to ink, where stars glimmered not as fire, but as promises kept. At the center of this twilight expanse floated a circle, a woven nest of wind threads and memory strands. Within it stood 3 chairs. Simple, low, carved from old starlight. Each one glowed with a gentle light. Finn stepped into the circle. There was no urgency, no command. Only waiting. Only welcome. The wind gathered near, now almost fully formed, not person, not creature, but shape and motion and meaning. This is where some remain, it said. Those who carried wishes with such gentleness, that the wind invited them to stay. And Finn saw images unfolding in the air around them. A girl who once sat by a window every evening, whispering kindnesses into the dusk. An old man who never spoke his own dreams, but wrote them as stories so others could find theirs. A baker who gave warm loaves to anyone who looked lonely, never asking names. They had all stepped into the wind. They had become the hush between petals, the warmth in a cup of tea, the thread that ties a good moment to a hard day. Finn turned slowly. One chair now glowed brighter. And the wind waited, as always, without pressure, without answer. Only invitation. Finn sat. And nothing happened. No flash. No song. No rush of wind. Only stillness. A deep, endless, living stillness. The kind that isn't empty, but full. Full of echoes. Full of warmth. Full of knowing. Inside the stillness, Finn heard themselves. Not their voice from now. Not even from before. But the voice that had always whispered behind each breath they'd taken. I thought I had nothing to give, it said, softly. But I was always giving. Finn's hands glowed now, faintly, as though holding light that had waited years to be seen. The bell at their neck pulsed one final time, and then, unraveled into the air. It became part of the wind. And Finn breathed. They remembered the hill. The folded knees. The silence. The ache. They remembered the first time the wind had curled around them, staying longer than it should have. And now they knew why. Because the wind had heard them. Had waited. Had carried what they could not speak. And now, they could do the same for others. They stood slowly. The wind, in reply, spiraled upward, not to leave, but to welcome. 1,000 threads of light moved toward Finn, and through them. They did not vanish. They became. The way a breeze curls a page. The hush between lines of a poem. The comfort in a moment not understood, but still felt deeply. Finn had become part of the wind that carried wishes. Not lost. Only everywhere. Beneath the endless weave of sky, the world spun on, unaware that something had changed, but feeling it nonetheless. The village at the foot of the hills continued to open their windows at dusk. The children still folded slips of paper with hopes tucked between clumsy letters. The elders still whispered blessings into steaming cups, letting the breath of their words rise into the air. But now the wind carried something more. It no longer passed only through windows. It brushed more gently across sleeping brows. It lingered longer in the hollow places behind hearts. It moved the petals in the gardens not by accident, but with love. And somewhere, a child on a hill sat with their knees hugged tight. Not Finn. Finn had become part of the hush. This child, younger yet, quieter still, sat on the grass worn smooth by many years of dreams. They did not write wishes. They did not even know how. They only closed their eyes and thought, a thought so tender it could barely lift itself from the folds of their mind. I hope someone knows I am here. And the wind that now carried the breath of Finn, curled gently around them. It lifted a small blossom from somewhere deep in the earth, a blossom shaped like folded stars, and placed it, soft as a sigh, into the child's open palm. The child gasped, eyes wide, wonder blooming where sorrow had once lived. Somewhere beyond sight, the stars leaned closer. And the wind, the endless, tender, listening wind, sighed its answer. I see you. I always have. The child carried the blossom home, not knowing what it was, but knowing it mattered. They placed it beside their bed, where it gave off a faint, impossible light, the color of remembering something beautiful just before waking. And each night after that, the wind returned. Sometimes, it brought the scent of rain never fallen. Sometimes, it carried the laughter of water over unseen stones. Sometimes, it brought nothing but the hush, and even that was enough. The villagers spoke of it in low voices. They said the wind had grown softer, kinder, fuller, somehow, as if it now held stories it had not carried before. They did not know of Finn. They did not know of the hall, the garden, the sky between moments. But they felt it. In the way their dreams deepened. In the way small hurts seemed to lift just a little faster. In the way the dusk tasted sweeter against their tongues. And somewhere, in a sky stitched with endless gentle threads, Finn drifted, not gone, not apart, but woven in. Into the hush before a wish. Into the warmth left behind after forgiveness. Into the quiet hands that hold the fragile edges of a new beginning. The wind carries them still. Carries all who ever dared to wish, even when they believed no one could hear. Carries them not toward endings, but toward ever soft beginnings. Where every breath is a new seed. And every wish, no matter how small, finds its way home. At last,